Maria Alejandra Off Topic, the podcast about the non-musical things around music. I am Maria Alejandra Jimenez, violinist, musician, and writer. Off Topic is more than just a podcast. It's a platform featuring articles, essays, and a free newsletter that explores this universe. Subscribe so you don't miss any content and visit the website mariaalejandrajimenez.com. That's Jimenez with a J and a Z. Subscribe on your favorite audio platform so you don't miss any episode. Our guest today is Jack Campbell. He's a violinist and composer from Canada. He blends classical music with art forms like visual arts, dance, theater, and popular music, believing it should reach diverse audiences beyond concert halls. His mission is to reintroduce the grand tradition of violinist composers to the public eye. His performances are a testament to this philosophy. While rooted in classical tradition, Campbell infuses his performances with a modern twist. Using cutting-edge technologies, he pushes the boundaries of the medium, creating unique harmonies and atmospheres. Now, on a more personal note, how did I meet Jack? We actually met through Instagram. He performed a piece from a composer who was one of my classmates during my studies in Basel. I went to check his profile and I got very, very interested in his approach to violin, to music, and performing. I couldn't really attend that concert in particular, but later we managed to meet in person for a coffee and had a very interesting talk. And I am super happy to have him in the podcast today. And the topic today is encryption in music from different angles: thematic, mathematical, personal, literal, and so on. So welcome, Jack. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Maria, and it's really a great pleasure to be here with you.
Amazing. So the first thing I actually ask to all the guests in this season is, do you have a recommendation to share? It can be a movie, a series, a book, a place to eat. It can be really anything that you've been enjoying lately.
Lately, I have been re-immersing myself, as I do every couple of years, in a novel which, I mean, favorites are a dangerous thing, but if I had a favorite novel, this would probably be the one. It's called The Clown, and it's by Heinrich Böll, the post-war German author. And I've read this book a few times. It's considered, from what I understand, a staple of literary education in Germany. But Böll is not necessarily an author that we get growing up in North America as I did. So when I discovered this book, I was very excited. And this particular read-through has been meaningful, as I think it's very relevant to the current geopolitical social climate we're living in. It's basically set through the first-person perspective of a young artist living in post-war Germany, and it deals with the dangers of fascism. It deals with the dangers of any sort of persecution of any person. It has a satire on the capitalist economy. It has satires around certain dangers surrounding organized religion. And it's mainly just a social critique about, what can bring humans together and what can tear humans apart, and about truth and honesty and protecting the integrity of truth and honesty in art. And what's particularly special about it is to have the perspective on the world through the eyes of a young artist, which for obvious reasons resonates with me. And I think it's a wonderful book, and I think it's particularly a book for the times we're in.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the recommendation. And I will definitely add it to my list of books to read because I don't know it. So I will check it out and I will read it. And when I do, I will let you know.
And with this podcast, because I've listened to all your other episodes and people are often suggesting books, I think you should start the Maria's Book Club.
Yeah, actually, I am thinking about it. So with this season, I am not going to launch a book club yet, but I will be launching soon a private community for like-minded people, so people can join, and for sure there we can talk about all these things also like in private. So that will happen with
You
this
heard it
new
here
season.
first, audience. You heard it here first.
Yes. Yes, amazing. And it's very interesting because I just recorded the very first episode of the season right before you. And also, the guest recommended a book that also very, very important for today's times, in which unfortunately the world is getting very weird and intense and complex. And I think as
Yes.
artists it's very important to resist this, to keep, especially something that I think it's very important is to keep thinking in a way that is critical and keep questioning and reflecting in our times, because I feel like the powerful people that are doing crazy things right now, they want us to stay silent and numb. So that's very, very important.
Yes, and as musicians, it's being numb and being silent is the antithesis of our existence.
Yes, exactly. And before I go to the next questions, I actually forgot to ask you, do you want to say something else about yourself? Or you are good with the
No,
introduction like that?
your introduction was very generous.
Okay, great. So we are good to continue. I wanted to ask you, what is your first memory associated with music?
You know, I have two memories that I cannot remember which one came first, but I know that they are my earliest memories as a human being, and both of them are directly associated with music. And logically, I'm pretty sure I know which one came first, because one of these two memories is I just remember being a baby and my mother singing, and my mother would sing to me when I needed emotional support. She would sing me to sleep. She would sing around the house. I remember it being a constant, and I think it was something that sort of arrived with my awareness of life. And the second memory is when I was very, very, very young. I remember being at a family friend's home, and there was an acoustic guitar there. And I remember the acoustic guitar sort of being put in my lap as a very small child, and of course the guitar was much bigger than I was. And I sort of remember smacking it and realizing that it could create noise. And I just remember feeling as if I'd a total fascination that your body could trigger this thing that was so magical. And I think we all have our first memories of creating instrumental sound.
Yes.
But I've sometimes joked that when you look at the abstract nature of my music, I've been whacking guitars ever since.
Yeah. We will get there. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I totally agree that. But you know that you will be surprised. I don't think that's something that everybody experienced. I try to
Yes.
bring a lot of non-musician people to my concerts as much as I can. Is one of the things
Yes.
that is really, really important for me. And very often people is surprised how such a tiny violin can like fill a full hall. Like they're like, but it sounds so loud. I wasn't expecting it to be so big. No, the sound.
It's a miracle of physics.
Yeah, it's incredible. And and yeah, it's true that uh, sound is a bit. Then we get used to it because we are surrounded by noise. But I always had the feeling that, especially as a kid, experiencing the creation of sound is very similar to the feeling of looking at the fire or looking at the sea. No, there is this sort of
Absolutely.
fascination. Is so hypnotic.
Absolutely. And when you look at our anthropological evolution as a species, we've learned that the same way that warmth and nutrition and rest are critical for our survival, that sound is as well, because it's how we communicate, it's how we interpret information, it's how we learn, it's how we reflect, it's how we make logical decisions. I mean, it's a force of life.
Yes, that's very, very interesting. And is there a person or something in particular that influenced you to become a musician and a composer?
I mean, there are too many to name.
Yes.
I I like to think that I've been lucky enough to have many musical ancestors, both that I was both living and dead, both related through DNA and not, related through having met them and the people from the past that have inspired me. I I mean, I think if there's one really critical influence in me becoming a musician, it was my mother, once again. And it's interesting to me because my mother is not a professional musician, but she has the most remarkable ear and musical sensitivity. And she's just a very musical person in the way she lives her life. And I've always thought that was curious because we know from linguistic science and psychology and anthropological science how we learn language from our mothers. And when you think of the linguistic properties of music and once again how we communicate with one another through that, it's always struck me that all my musical memories from childhood are associated with my mother, and it's sort of a maternal language learning process, I think. And then, of course, yeah, I've been absolutely privileged with all the musical mentors I've had. You know, they've all had such monumental roles on my creative life, on my professional existence, and just on my personal existence. You know, I've had so many. You know, it's just as important to have mentors of how to be a good musician as it is to have mentors on how to be a musician who is a good person as well. And I've had countless examples of that, too many to name. And then there are those from the past who perhaps we haven't met, but we feel like we've met, or we've, you know, spoken to in dreams while we were asleep, or we feel like we've met because of the uh, the communication through sound waves across centuries that we have. I mean, I remember when I first bought the complete book of Beethoven piano sonatas. Sorry, piano and violin sonatas,
Yes, yes.
which are probably one of the most important sets of music to ever be developed, and have had an enormous impact on me in terms of. Now, that's a very open-ended statement. So, you know, I'll say in terms of their melodic development, in terms of their formal construction, in terms of the relationship between the violin and the piano, in terms of how he makes the violin and piano at the same and also embraces their differences and puts them in these contrasting. I mean, it's a masterclass in composition. And I remember when I first got that collection for years, I slept with it under my pillow.
Yes.
You know, that's such a
Well,
that's such a corny, silly sort of sounds like something from a Hollywood movie thing to say, but it's true. You know, when with a figure like Beethoven, you know, it's you just want to be as close to them as possible. You know, it's the same reason we pray to religious deities that we've never met that are greater than us. You know, as a musician, you look at a figure like Beethoven and you just feel like if you can eschew some wisdom from him through the ether.
yeah.
And then the other thing that I think is very important as a musician, and something that I really, really strongly believe is it's important to have artistic inspirations that are not musical.
I agree with that.
And
Yes.
I think that's a problem that we've gotten into very much in the post-war period, in terms of our attitudes towards musical performance, musical education, and the like is when you look at earlier centuries, for example, the Renaissance, or even if you go back to ancient Greece, where it all sort of began, or even cultures before Greece for that matter, musicians were knowledgeable on maths, on science, in visual art. It's an inseparable connection that goes from the ancients to people like Da Vinci, up until, the early 20th century. I mean, Paul Klee was a virtuoso of the violin, and Albert Einstein played Mozart on his violin to relax. So, and through having a comprehensive understanding of all disciplines, social, academic, scientific, artistic, it allows you the privilege of new insights and new perspectives on music and its purpose and how to properly interpret it. And I've certainly had many figures that inspired me creatively. For example, the American conceptual visual artist Robert Rauschenberg had a gigantic impact on how I saw creative form, on how I saw color and texture, and how notions of the past and present and future can simultaneously coexist. And I'd also name the great literary wizard Oscar Wilde, because I remember when I first discovered Wilde as a teenager, and I mean I've been infatuated with him ever since. But it's kind of a common statement that you hear all over the place. But you sort of want things to be beautiful and interesting as a
Yes.
creative. And, I think if it's really great, I think they're both at the same time. And I remember when I first discovered Oscar Wilde, realizing, this is something which is of great intellectual curiosity and also great aesthetic, emotional, personal, human beauty at once. And perhaps at its core, at least for me, that's what I'm trying to create artistically.
That's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I will go back actually to Beethoven, because also for me Beethoven was a very important part of me becoming a musician in a different way, because besides music, for me writing was always very important, and I started writing journals when I was very little. And I remember one of the things that impacted me the most as a child was reading for the first time a biography of Beethoven. And
Really?
the thing that impacted me the most was this quest for freedom, for true freedom. And this also, I was very inspired but by his rebellious nature, and
Yes.
I was so into it that I remember that I started writing almost compulsively quotes.
Yes.
Started to collect biographies, different biographies of Beethoven, and I was rewriting them on my journal, and I was writing about it nonstop, and I got so into it, and not really into his music, more into his thinking and his way of approaching life. And this is something that really
Yes.
impacted me as a kid. I was very, very little, so I don't know how come a figure that was so far away from me in terms of time and in terms of life experiences impacted me so much.
So it's just what you were saying that really resonated with me, because I think one of the things that as children, and perhaps all throughout our life, that we have is we have an instinct to want to be like fictional characters and to find fictional characters that resonate with us. And, I mean, in certain perspectives on academic study or logic or things, that can be a negative instinct. But I think we have to acknowledge that it's a very human thing to want to do, whether it's, a little kid who wants to be Batman, or somebody reads The Lord of the Rings, and, there's a certain character. I'm choosing, sort of childhood classics there as examples. But I think Beethoven has the perhaps what is the greatest stamp of survival of a historical figure, which is that he has, across centuries, achieved an almost mythological status. And he's almost a character that lives in our imaginations. And yes, we are so blessed that through musicology and through historical record keeping of the time, we do know who he was, and we do know what he believed, and we do know what he did. So, and of course, there is a problem with revisionist musicology. But, Beethoven can kind of be in our minds who we want him to be. We can all have our own dialogue with him, and we can all hope to be like him, even though we didn't know him. And we can all, as young musicians, hope to achieve what we see in him that inspires us.
Yes, and something, but also I forgot to say, very strong in Beethoven is his integrity.
Yes.
He wanted to do something in a way, and he was doing it that way. And if it was not that way, it was not happening. And for me,
Yeah.
this is also this became also in my life like a key value in what I do. And then another thing, as you say, for me is also very important as musicians to find inspiration in things that are outside of music. So this is why I started this podcast, because
Yes.
the music we make is a reflection of who we are as people, and the fullest we are and the more curious we are towards life, the more things we have to give as musicians and artists. And I want to link this with this topic of encryption that I'm very curious about, because I want to know what you mean by that. But also, something I've been thinking about a lot recently is how music is actually a symbolic language. And I realized that in my life I'm very interested in symbolic languages. And what I mean by symbolic languages is that a symbol is a series of elements that are put together in a certain way to convey a certain meaning, but it's not one meaning. It's like this meaning, it opens the perspective and it opens the way you see the world. So it gives you new layers of perception, not to perceive the world in different ways. And for instance, I'm very interested also in learning about, for example, two topics that really interested me are, for example, astrology and tarot, that are also symbolic languages. And I see a lot of similarities between them and music. And then I want to ask you, what do you mean by encryption in music?
I will answer that, but first I just want to say one more thing in response to what you said about
Yes.
symbolic languages, which is that you touched on something about what you can take away from symbolism and how it can stay with you. And I've had this conversation many times with different people, but one thing I really strongly believe is that the testament to a successful musical performance is if you have left the audience with something they can take away with them as they leave the concert hall.
Yes.
This can be so many things. It can be a moment of beauty they remember. It can be a moment of interest they remember, a moment of curiosity. It can be that perhaps they had a strong urge that this wasn't something that they thought was correct for whatever, of course, within ethical, moral, standards, that perhaps this wasn't necessarily how they envision music, or this isn't something that they find aesthetically pleasing, because, then you've triggered intellectual thought, and you've triggered discussion, and you've hopefully triggered critical thinking. And it doesn't mean that the audience has to get something per se. It doesn't mean that, you have to necessarily have understood, but you want, as an audience member, as I frequently am, and as somebody who hopes to give pleasant experiences to the audience, you just want the person to leave a little different. It can be in a giant way, it can be in a minuscule way, but you just want, one shared molecule between
Yes.
the two of you.
I totally agree. And I always say that, and unfortunately, very often I feel like there is a lot of standardization in classical music.
Yes.
And very often when I go to concerts, I get out of the concert feeling like I didn't get much out of it, because what you say, like, I feel like sometimes musicians, we try to be too politically correct, and we don't dare to really express our authenticity, because that
Yes.
might imply making mistakes that are really not mistakes, no? And very often I would rather go to a concert. Like I often feel like, okay, but I need more. Like I want to leave the hall with something. Give me something. I don't want to hear the perfect a piece played perfectly, because for that I stay home and I put a record.
No, and the one thing that is really on my mind lately is I try and go to at least one or two contemporary music performances a week. Sometimes that's not achievable, but that's my goal. And
Yes.
I mean, the musicianship of people these days is just extraordinary. I mean, it seems to me like that the technical standard amongst musicians is so unbelievably high right now. It seems like everybody's becoming a super virtuoso. It's really, really impressive. But one thing I do, and this isn't a critique of anybody, this isn't a criticism, this is just a philosophical question I ask myself, and it's something that can certainly be applied to my music as well, is when you go to something that's considered contemporary music or new music, right? Sometimes I find myself thinking, how much of this is actually new? How much of this is contemporary? And how much of this is just we're copying things that were new and contemporary in 1955 or 1965? And now, of course, there is artistic lineage, and that's very important. And as artists, we're constantly building upon the past, and that is the grand artistic tradition. So there's nothing wrong with being inspired, and there's nothing wrong with the sort of taking a leap from what has come before you. I believe it was Morton Feldman who would talk about taking leaps. But sometimes I wonder, gee, is this really what we're as fresh as we're presenting it, or is it just regurgitation? And then of course it raises the question, which I think is perhaps a controversial musical question these days, but one I think we really need to ask, which is, how important is it to be new constantly? Like,
Yes.
in the end, does everything always need to be new? Because I feel like sometimes in the striving for constant progress in that sense of the word, and that I mean just like time moving forward constantly, I worry sometimes that we lack a quality and integrity in art. Now that's
Yeah.
a very big question, and I'm certainly not the person who has the answer to it. But you sometimes wonder. So, is what do we lose in running towards the new constantly? And also, when we look at the history of cultural activity, was that which was new and was contemporary written with the intention of it being such? I think when we look at the great groundbreaking pieces of human culture, I'm not necessarily sure if breaking ground was the utmost formative thought in the creator's mind. I think they were trying to create something of integrity that had the technical prowess to it, that had human emotion, human connectivity, and had the ability to leave the viewer or the listener with something to take away from it. So anyway,
Yeah.
I just totally went on a tangent there, but I
No,
hope.
it's fine. This is why I call it off topic, because the idea is that we get out of topic. So we are perfectly in line with the topic, with the
Okay,
podcast.
good,
No, but
good,
this is
good,
very
good.
interesting, because I was actually thinking about it recently. I was talking about it with my partner, and I we I we were exactly talking about this subject, and I had this thought that I think as artists, if we think that we want to do something new, that already inhibits our creativity, because I don't think it's really possible to do something new. I mean, it's been thousands of history. We are billions of human beings. To which extent we can actually create something that is really new? I think that at least the mindset I want to have for myself. I don't mean that this should be the correct mindset. Is I want to be authentic. I want to be as much
Yeah.
authentic and genuine as I can, because I don't know if I can create something new or not. And but I know that I can try to be as authentic and genuine as I can, which is not that easy. And another thing that I think about often is I do this kind of mental game to think, what will Bach be doing right now in this
Yeah.
present moment? And honestly, I don't think he will be doing what we call contemporary music. I think he will be chilling with um with, I don't know, for example, Damon Albarn, that is the vocalist of Blur
Yeah.
and Gorillaz, chilling with him in a studio with some synthesizers, creating a new record. Because I think that's newer in a way than what we call contemporary music. I mean, at least this is what I think. It's a very strong statement, but I don't know. I really believe that.
No, yeah, no, I think that's a very, very interesting thing. And you know what you're saying about you were having these similar conversations with your partner. You know, that's one thing that is so important, is to have these artistic dialogues, because all the thoughts that I've shared so far and all of my opinions are things I've developed through conversation with other people. And a lot of these
Yes.
ideas are, you know, ideas I have heard from other human beings that have entered my mind and I've sat with and processed. And that's why podcasts like these are so important, because it allows for us to continue the discourse, which allows for change to happen.
Yes, I totally agree. So yeah, now I wanted
The
to.
question was
The question
encryption in
was
music,
encryption in
right?
music. Yes, let's go for it, because I
Okay.
am really curious to hear your take on that, because I don't know exactly what
Well,
you mean. So yes.
I have been asked on many occasions to describe or define my compositional practice. And that is a really hard thing to do. In some ways, it's much easier when other people do it for you, even. But when I've looked at the works I have created, which I think have been of quality, that I've felt like I wanted to share with the public, there are two main themes running concurrent through them all, which are reflection and encryption. Now, just very quickly, the notion of reflection, that's the easier one. You know, reflection is respecting the past in the present and hoping for a future of aesthetic, human, emotional, ethical interest. You know, reflection is understanding the personal, psychological, historical, and biological impacts of sound, as we were talking about earlier. And, you know, I think when we're working with interdisciplinary creation, I think reflection is perhaps the symbolic language, to use what you're talking about. You know, we reflect each other in other art forms. We reflect our lived human experience. But I choose to tackle reflection first because I think reflection is inherent to encryption itself, and I think it's based in that. So, of course, the practical definition of encryption that I think we all very much know of is the idea of a code being
Hmm.
encrypted,
Yes.
and perhaps information in a way being presented in a way which is not inherently obvious to that which we naturally know. And of course, encryption allows for decryption, which is to take something that sparks your curiosity in any way and develop a relationship with it through logic, through instinct, through curiosity, to try and understand it. And I really believe, Maria, that music is naturally an encrypted language because we naturally have emotional and intellectual reactions to music which are innate within us, which we naturally understand, and which we can generally share with other human beings, and sometimes not necessarily know why it happened or why we understand it so much. But then you can delve into deciphering it. And that is where the human relationship to a piece of music happens. So I think on a very broad level, music is naturally encrypted, and that can allow for a personal creative intimacy. It can allow for the beauty of the unknown. It can allow for us to explore the mysteries of silence together, and it can allow for us to have translation. To me, one of the great beauties of being alive is when you can be in a room or any sort of place with someone where you don't speak a word of language in common with one another. You can connect through music. And when that happens, I've had the privilege to have had that experience many times. It shows you that this is a hidden code that links us together in our understanding of things. But there are two other levels to what encryption means to me, which are, I'm very interested in taking hidden languages and hidden structures and directly allowing them to be the foundational part of the formal structure and the pitch structure, etc., of my compositions. And that's a very abstract thing to say, so I'll give two examples. The piece I've written that has been performed the most, and for which I'm most commonly known, is Sounding Bomba Enigmatic Music. And that was a piece that I worked on for 5 years. It happened that its release coincided with the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, and also the rise of artificial intelligence, which were thematically linked to it. But basically, Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman and a team of many, many people, in fact, actually a team that was almost 90% women, which is something that history has sort of cracked the German Enigma code during the Second World War. There are many different historical estimates on how many lives that saved, how long it shortened the war, how much it shortened the war by. They did that through this invention, the Bomba machine, which was sort of an earlier, it was an electromechanical computational mechanism. In a way, it was related through place, through sharing of information, through same purpose to the Colossus machine, which was the world's first computer. And this cracked the Enigma code. So I built a musical Enigma machine and a musical Bomba machine where you could input a melody into the Enigma machine, and it would encrypt it using precisely the same mathematics as the original Enigma machine. I did a linguistic mathematical translation between the notes of music and the notes of the German language. And so you could have a totally encrypted musical melody, and then that was decrypted by the musical Bomba machine. So the course of pitch occurrence, pitch register, pitch placement in the pieces, which is 15 minutes long, is just a melody being decrypted until it goes from totally abstract at the beginning to returning to its original form. And of course, another element of it was that I had electronic tracks that were based on found sound from recordings of the original machines themselves, which I constructed. It's actually a little known fact of history that Alan Turing himself invented one of the world's first computer-generated instruments. So I used softwares that descended from him, and he played the violin, and the melody I encrypted was his favorite melody, etc., etc. So that's actually taking the historical practice of encryption and following its direct mathematical processes, encrypting it musically. So it's a direct musical encryption. And then another example is a piece that I'm starting to tour around, which is I have a great interest in birdsong, and I've spent a lot of time in Canada recording the calls of birds, transcribing them. And then I've recently completed this long-scale solo violin work where those transcriptions form the basis of the music. Now, due to ornithologists and scientists alike, we have an understanding of what certain bird calls mean. There are danger calls, there are mating calls, there are calls of communication, but it is their own language which we
Yes.
don't understand. People cannot naturally learn how to speak bird without intense study. I know naturalists and the like that can mimic the calls perfectly and know what they mean, but it is its own language that is encrypted to us humans at first glance unless we study it entirely. And I'm not sure philosophically if we know the meaning behind every bird call, but what we do know is that there's a natural human attraction to them and a natural human mystery to them. So here is an inherently encrypted language, which perhaps I'm trying to decrypt through sharing it musically with humans. And it's amazing how much I've learned about the natural world through this process. And then finally, as a very simple third point, there are certain mathematical processes which can take inherent numerical patterns and transform them to where they hold the same properties, but they are in a different form. It always reminds me of that quote of Schoenberg's about Brahms, where he talks about how Schoenberg talked about how Brahms's music varied without varying. You can transform something to where it's unrecognizable, but it still has the same meaning. And so that's just a very mathematical process that I use in all my compositions, and it's something that I'm very curious about.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very curious because from how I know you and the way you make your own music, you are very much connected with this more mathematical and scientific side of things. And I am completely the opposite. I am more connected with like the irrational, spiritual side of things. And what I find very interesting is how at the end, in a way or another, both things touch each other, and both things are basically the
Right.
same but explained in different ways. I like to try to analyze symbols and analyze mythologies and archetypes and all these kind of things. Is very fascinating to me how this also has a resonance on a purely mathematical sense.
Yeah, and one thing that I consider a lot when I deal with these sort of more logic, fact-based concepts, and sometimes someone will pose the question to me, which is, well, music is an imaginative action. So how do you tie that into these factual concepts being expressed musically, logically? Well, first of all, yes, music is imaginative, but it's based on an entire millennia-long history that we are contributing to, and also something that I think is very, very critical to understanding just the nature of ideas in general, which is that any scientific realization or scientific revelation or scientific discovery or scientific thought is inherently based in imagination. Because we do not discover anything factual unless someone has the curiosity to imagine
Yes,
and lead them to discover that fact.
I totally agree. And this is really fascinating because also, especially in today's world, in which not only in today's world, in general, I feel like human beings they lean towards something that is very binary, like it's like black, white, peace, war, left,
Yeah.
right, etc., etc., etc. And there is this kind of opposition between creativity, imagination, and science. And it's like
Yeah.
both things are like separate things. And actually, I feel like being just spiritual can maybe lead to some very dangerous thoughts like organized religion do or certain cults do. Also being overly scientific is not amazing. I feel like in general what keep humanity going is the combination of both and the balance between these two things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, and it's super, super important to give space to these two ways of seeing the world because, as you say, like what is now a scientific achievement, at the beginning it was imagination or intuition. It was something that didn't exist yet in language, so to speak. No, it existed already, but it didn't exist in language. And in order to exist in language, it had to be first or either something that you imagine or either an intuition, something that you cannot really like put your finger on what it is exactly.
Well, Oscar Wilde used to say that the greatest joy in life is the pleasure of finding things out.
Yes, I totally agree. Love Oscar Wilde as well. Fantastic. Before going to the next section of the podcast, I actually wanted to ask you because you did a lot of very cool projects and tours. Do you produce them yourself? Do you have a team? I wanted to ask more like in general, if there is an advice that you could give to young creatives, musicians, artists on doing their own projects. If somebody is stuck or they have an idea and don't know how to make it happen.
My advice to anybody who wants to make their own projects and idea happen is to not be afraid of someone saying no. And, in most cases, if you put yourself out there, no is somebody saying no is the worst thing that can happen. And when you think about it, that's actually not necessarily a bad thing. The world would be a lot better place if more people said no. It's it's not something to be afraid of. Um, and somebody will eventually say yes. Uh, and yes, naturally putting yourself out there and taking those kinds of risks is scary. But when you think about it logically, there's not a lot to be afraid of. And when you think of the fact that you will get some people who say yes, the results of those yeses will be so rewarding that any fear or discomfort or angst is worth it.
Yes, I agree. Um I don't know where I heard that, but I think it was an advice on creating your own business or something, is to go chase the biggest amount of no's that you can get, because eventually somebody will say yeah, and when you go to the world like, okay, today I'm going to get 50 no's, so you actually ask 50 people something, and eventually somebody is going to say yes. I totally agree with that.
There's a story I really like about that, which is George Orwell. When he finished writing Animal Farm, he sent it to an American publisher, and he got a letter back, and it basically said, "Dear Mr. Orwell, thank you for your message. We regret to inform you that the American public isn't interested in a story about animals." This is one of the most important social, political, literary works of all time, and that's what he gets back. And even that's a silly answer because, as Christopher Hitchens said, this is the land of Mickey Mouse. Americans love stories about animals, you know.
Yes,
So
yes.
I remember there's a time when I lived in Canada where I had that printed out and put on my desk just as a reminder that you can always keep trying because somebody will understand what you're trying to do.
Yes, I totally agree. Is there something else that you would like to say before we go to the next section of the podcast?
Well, I mean, this is a silly, simple advice that countless people have always said, but I think it's just as very important to work as hard as you possibly can. And while you're working as hard as you possibly can, also make sure that you're really, really enjoying life while doing it. As a musician, the beauties and enjoyment of life are what leads to us finding inspiration in all inspiration to create, inspiration to perform, inspiration to share. And yes, you need to um, commit yourself fully, but part of that commitment is really finding joy in your existence.
Yes, I agree. And that's also very close to Oscar Wilde way of
Yes.
seeing the world. So that's perfect. Thank you very much for sharing that. So before we wrap up, I prepared a couple of games with the guests. And I actually changed it from the first season, so it's not the same. So it's actually a real surprise. And
My.
the first one is I have a series of questions inspired by the Proust questionnaire. Do you know it by any chance, the Proust
Heard of it, but
questionnaire?
I don't know it by heart. No, but this is
Okay,
exciting.
I adapted it a little bit because some questions were very odd. I have 24 of them, so I will ask you to tell me a
Okay, give it
number
to me.
from
I'll
1
get.
to 24. Yes.
Okay, pick a number from 1 to 24.
Yes.
11.
11. So here we go. If you were a plant, which one would you be?
That is a very, very good question.
That's like my favorite question of the whole thing, so I'm very excited.
I have an enormous fondness for melons.
Okay.
They are my favorite thing to eat. I think their symmetry is beautiful. I think the way that they're resilient, they have this protective skin that's resilient to all the forces and bombardments of nature, but when you cut them open, they're vibrant and beautiful. And I think there's a lot of nice metaphor and symbolism in melons. So I would say that if I were to be a plant, I would want to be a cantaloupe plant.
Beautiful. Thank you. Let's do another one. Pick a number from 1
Yeah,
to
this is
24.
fun. This time you choose it.
Oh, no, the thing is that I have okay, I don't remember the question, so I will think a number. 23. No, 23. Yes, 23.
Perfect.
It's before 24. Perfect. So
23 is
23.
good. 23 is good.
What is your most frequent state of mind lately?
I am trying lately to allow myself the freedom of being silent. Because as a musician, my job is to make noise, and that's my great love. But I don't think you can properly embrace the importance and purpose of making noise if you aren't able to be comfortable and content and inspired in silence.
Beautiful. I really like that. Also, I like the idea of being silent in social setups. That's something that people find uncomfortable very often, and I think sometimes it's very important. So great. And let's do a
Yes.
last one. So yes, pick a number.
Pick a number. Okay. The number 8.
8. So here we go. If you could live another life just out of curiosity, which one would you choose?
Like another person's life that I know of.
Yes, or another reality.
No, that's a really good question. I'm just pondering it.
I'm thinking also for myself. Yeah, I mean, I think if I will pick another life just out of curiosity, I will be a sexologist. That will be like a funny path to follow myself. I think that will be mine. Yes.
I think I would want to be quantum or particle physicist.
Very cool. You are in the right country for that also, so you're not so far away.
And I think the reason I would do this is because I feel like the factual understanding I would have of these most profound concepts would allow me to be a better artist.
Very cool. Great. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. And then I have just a last question. Imagine a situation of total disconnection. It can be anything. It can be like being in an island, desert island, that's very cliche, or being in a spiritual retreat, whatever you want. What are the things that you will take with you?
At some sort of satellite phone so I could contact my loved ones. How many things do I get to take? Is there a limit?
No.
No. All right. Well, then I'd very easy. I'd like a satellite phone to contact my loved ones. I'd want my violin. I'd want an absolutely enormous, shipping container filled with composition paper
Okay.
and many pens so that I could keep writing music. I'd want the complete works of Oscar Wilde. I'd want an encyclopedia of the history of painting. And I would want a gramophone and the complete works of Beethoven.
Very
And
good.
finally, I'd want a toothbrush because hygiene is very important to me.
Great. So that's fantastic and very much in connection with what we talked about today. Amazing. So thank you so much for being here in the podcast today. Where can people learn more about your work? Where they can follow your...
Well, you can follow me on Instagram, which is Jack.M for Michael.Campbell. That's my handle. And then if you really want to know what I'm up to, you can send me a note on Instagram. And I would, first of all, I'd love to talk to you. It's always nice to hear from people. And if you're interested in knowing where you could catch a concert or how you could listen to or purchase one of my records or something of the like, you can give me your email and I will put you on my newsletter.
Very good. And is there an event or a project that you would like to share? I don't know when it's going to be out exactly, the podcast, but I don't know if there is something you would like to share right now.
Yeah, I'll share one thing, which is December 5th, 8 p.m. I'm giving a solo recital in the library of Conway Hall in London. The Conway Hall Ethical Society is one of the most important centers of cultural and informed ethical thought in London. It's connected to figures like Bertrand Russell and George Orwell, to bring him up again. And it's also long been a center for contemporary classical music, and I am thrilled to be performing there. So if you're in London or near London and would like to hear both the Birdsong and Enigma piece I mentioned earlier, you can come to that show.
Perfect. Thank you very much. If this goes after, just send it to me. I will share it on my Instagram as well. So for you, to the listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Maria Alejandra Off Topic. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Remember that Off Topic is a bigger platform. Find articles, essays, and the newsletter on the website mariaalejandrajimenez.com. And if you like this episode, share it with your favorite people, subscribe on your preferred platform, including YouTube, and leave a rating. It's the best way to support this show. And that's it for today. We will meet again very, very soon for more off-topic conversations. Bye!